Before we jump into the episode today, I want to share something with you from my heart. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really can't tell you how much your support means to me. We've been doing the podcast now for almost 4 years. I can't even believe it. And I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you that listens, shares an episode with your friends, sends me a DM or a text message letting me know how an episode resonated with you or any aha moments. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to be able to create this podcast. It has been such a blessing in my life, and I love hearing the ways it's been able to provide value in yours as well. One thing you might not know is how much work it takes to be consistent with a podcast. In fact, did you know that the majority of podcasts don't make it past episode number 10? And we are well beyond that. And it's just a lot thinking of the episodes, recording them, editing them, managing the guests, making sure that everything runs smoothly and gets uploaded consistently and regularly. And so that's why I have created an amazing opportunity for you to support the podcast monetarily. And in exchange for that, you will get exclusive premium subscriber content. So for as little as $3 a month, you can become a premium subscriber of the podcast. And every month I will upload new voice-guided workouts and breathwork meditation audio for you. So that way you can work out with me, coaching you in your ears. You can also take a moment to reduce your stress and relax and come down and ground down with one of my breathwork audios. So if that is on your heart to support the podcast for as little as $3 a month to become a premium podcast subscriber, I can't tell you how much that means to me and the growth of this podcast. I appreciate you. If you're interested, click the link in the description, become a premium podcast subscriber, new content every month, and while supplies last, I'll send you an exclusive podcast coffee mug so you can have your self-love and sweat coffee every morning. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, Lunden Souza. Hey, have you grabbed your free Self-Love and Sweat monthly calendar yet? This calendar is so amazing. It comes right in your inbox every single month to help you have a little nugget of wisdom, a sweaty workout, a mindset activity, just a little something to help keep you focused and motivated and keep that momentum towards your goals. So every day when you get this calendar, you'll see a link that you can click that will lead to a podcast episode or a workout or something that will be very powerful and quick to read. And then you'll also see on the top left corner of every single day, there's a little checkbox in the calendar. And what that is that's for your one thing. You can choose one thing every month, or it can be the same, something that you want to implement, and make this something that you can easily implement, like daily meditation or getting a certain amount of steps or water, for example, and staying hydrated, and even taking your supplements. This can be something if you want to get more regular doing a particular habit and routine, you can choose what that checkbox means. So if you want your Self-Love and Sweat free monthly calendar delivered right to your inbox every month on the first of the month, go to lifelikelunden.com/calendar, fill out the form really quickly, and you will have your calendar in your inbox within a few short minutes. That's lifelikelunden, lifelikelunden.com/calendar. Go get yours for free and enjoy this episode. Happy today and welcome back to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, and Self-Love and Sweat Radio. I'm really excited for our guest today. I actually always refer to you, Pat, as your your Instagram name, Pat Smith Wellness. Like I just have it in my brain, in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, today Pat Smith Wellness is going to be on the podcast. But Pat is a high performance coach, NeuroChangeSolutions Consultant, and Holistic Nutritionist. His previous sales experience working for multiple Fortune 1000 companies in the RV and marine industries gives him a unique perspective on the importance of bridging the gap between the performance and well-being in the workplace. Pat has a deep desire to guide others in creating sustainable changes to reach peak performance in their personal and professional lives. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
I just want to start quickly with how we met. Pat and I are both involved in a community called NABA, which if you guys have listened to the podcast before, I've been talking a lot more about it recently, which is a community that stands for Natural Art of Being Alive. And Pat and I both created courses, one of the first people to create courses within this community. And that's how Pat and I met. We met at the first NABA event. I don't even remember when it was. I guess April of last year,
yeah,
I think.
May,
I can't remember. Okay. Yeah. What is time, May we met, and it was cool because you and I had connected on Instagram, which is why Pat Smith Wellness always comes to my mind. Connected on Instagram, met in real life, had an opportunity to meditate together on the pool deck up at that event. We just kind of created a little group. I felt like we had so much in common in terms of our backgrounds in fitness, our passion for meditation, our passion for helping people live a life where there is that balance and there is that integration of work and personal life and letting it all flow. But I remember you sharing on Instagram one time, and maybe I got the details wrong, so feel free to fill in the blanks, but I kind of want to start it here. I even read it in your bio, really working with Fortune 1000 companies. You talk about being kind of at the peak of your career financially and doing all the things business-wise and kind of having all of that set up. But you still didn't feel fulfilled or happy or content, right? And I think a lot of people listening probably have felt that way in their life one way or another. It's like sometimes we think, once this happens and I have this, then I'll feel this type of way. So what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, that was the most, I would say that was the most, it was fear producing at one point, but it was also where I had the most growth opportunity for me to dive into. And so, from 23 till when I left my job I guess I was 30, I was just working my way up what would be considered the corporate ladder, starting off really making, maybe like $40,000 when I first started, to when I finally left, getting ready to potentially make, $250,000. And the biggest thing though was every time I wanted more and more and more, but I noticed that my happiness level never really increased, which is what led me to figuring out, and especially diving into meditation, understanding what is it that's leaving me unfulfilled, and knowing that it's nothing external is going to fix this internal void, if you will. And that's where the journey began of self-discovery on what is it that I'm actually passionate about and what limitations am I putting on myself to not be able to lean into that. And a lot of it came around beliefs around money and what was possible, and will I be able to make it out on my own, and will be able to make that type of money, or at least survive without having this type of job. And thinking back even beyond when I first started a full-time job, I mean, back at 16, I was still working. I worked in a factory when I was younger, and just to get the idea of what it felt like for working. So from 16 till 30, I was conditioned to know that that was the only way for me to be able to live. However, as we've seen in this day and age, at least from what I see, is that we can make money in so many different ways that putting a limitation on that it has to be a certain way is a false belief. And that's for each of us to dive into on our own. However, that journey was just super interesting because that's what led me to be where I'm at today. And the interesting thing was I finally put my 2 weeks in notice to finally go all in on everything that I wanted, literally the second day at the Dr. Joe retreat, which was huge for me. And so I had this huge breakthrough, and I needed to commit to myself. If I wasn't going to do it then, I was never going to be able to do it. So a lot of that fear was there, but that fear was just made up. And once I leaned into it, there was so much more to come from that and so much growth to be had.
So good. I love what you said, fear inducing. It was
Mm-hmm.
very fear inducing in the beginning. And you said it was about at age 30 that you decided to take the jump and take the leap and jump full force into even more of who you were becoming. Was there, thinking about it now, was there any part of you that knew that before you were 30? Like, did you hear a whisper or like get an itch a little bit sooner, but the fear was too much? Like, what was that block of time in your life of like knowing, then the fear, and then actually doing the thing?
Yeah, oh, that was a whole. I think that was almost a full 2 years. I mean, early on in 2020, I hired, which was surprising, but I had hired my first coach, and one of the things he asked me was, "How do you like your job?" And he knew right away that when I stuttered or didn't hesitate and say, "I love my job," he knew there were some areas for me to dive into to learn more about. And I had said that, "Hey, I have a side business." This was at the time in 2020, doing nutrition coaching, and I would love to make it full time, but I don't think it's realistic. And that's where the fears start to set in. I kept telling myself, it's not realistic. It can't happen. I'll never be able to make this much money. And I had the conditioning before all of that. So it took truly a full 2 years of me breaking through so many interpersonal barriers that I had put up on my own and created this pressure and this, essentially, as you said, fear and just unrealistic thinking, that I had to break through in order for me to finally get the courage to take action. And that, of course, meant lots of journaling and coaching and mentoring and meditation and writing out what I want and what I don't want, and sticking to my boundaries. And accumulation of all of that is what led for me to finally be able to take that leap, which um, that leap itself was the scariest part. After that, you're just in it. And so, just like anything, there was always challenges. There was challenges at my old job. There's still challenges in my business now. It's just, which challenges are you interested in choosing? So that's where I noticed that journey really took me. And that 2 year journey of what it took me through has also allowed for me to then be able to serve my clients at a highest level, because knowing that there's so many things deep down in terms of limiting beliefs and self limitations that we put on ourselves that have to be uncovered first if we're going to make true lasting change.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said of there's always going to be challenges, but what challenges are you choosing?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be the quote graphic that we make for
Sure.
this episode. I always do
Yeah.
promotional content, and that's powerful because I think it's important for anybody listening. And I've made leaps in my life too. It's like, it's not that you get the silver platter with the perfect meal,
Mm-hmm.
air quotes meal, or like that silver platter moment delivered to you. It's just that you get to choose the challenges that you face, knowing that they're in more congruence with the person that you want to be and
Mm-hmm.
like what you want to do in your life. And it seems like what I took from what you said is that seeking more and more clarity, and then sitting with some of those limiting beliefs as we do in
Mm-hmm.
meditation ended up becoming bigger than the fear. Would you say that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that decision itself, and I'm curious what your thoughts even are, is like when you have taken those big leaps, you know, what type of person do you become from taking those leaps? Like what type of confidence in yourself comes from that? Because I know for me, that was where it was like, holy crap, I'm actually doing this. And by me committing to myself, my confidence in what I'm able to do rose so much. And I'm curious if you had similar experiences at all.
Yeah, totally. I think you really get to see what you're capable of. I think you get to see, um, yeah, that you can do hard things. And I know that you and I both have a background in fitness and love working out. And I think that's to me how working out matters even more, because you have opportunities to do hard things and feel good afterwards and push through limits in a way that it transcends into other areas of our lives, instead of it being about what we look like and if our abs are perfect or whatever. And so I think, leaning on having done hard things in the past, working out wise. And then also looking back in the history of Lunden and being like, okay, that was hard and I did that. Okay, that was hard and I did that. For me, the book that this was before I even knew about Dr. Joe Dispenza. I read a book by Brendan Burchard called High Performance Habits. And it was like in either 17 or 18 when I was living in Austria. And I was doing a photo shoot and a video shoot because I did fitness modeling and fitness videos and all the things for Runtastic and Adidas. And I remember we were doing a shoot outside I think it was in Spain. And I was like getting my hair and makeup done. And every second I was like plowing through this book, High Performance Habits. And as soon as I finished that book, I knew that that was the moment that everything had changed for me, right? But then it wasn't until 2020, so that's like a 2-year period as well, that I actually left Austria. Granted, it was COVID and all the things, but I left Austria and decided if I was going to be like in lockdown, I was going to be with my family, not in another country on the other side of the world. So that was kind of like a little 2-year period. Because when you said 2 years, I was kind of like, oh, there was some little bits and pieces of that in my life too. And then I moved back to America and still did. And I remember knowing like, okay, I don't think I want to do the workout stuff anymore. I want to work more on the work ins in my life, in the lives of others. And I still kind of thought, okay, can I make money without doing fitness? Will people be able to see me not as this fitness persona in this fitness light? Like, can I even do this? And so November of 2020, I went to Cancun to my first Dr. Joe week-long retreat. And then at the end of 2022, another 2-year period, right? I decided to completely let go of fitness. I was like, I'm retiring from fitness. I just don't want to do this anymore. I remember just shutting down my online programs, not offering online fitness coaching anymore. And it happened. I was on Zoom teaching somebody squat form. And I remember getting off that Zoom call and being like, I never want to do that shit again. Like, not because it's not great, but there's other people out there who want to teach exercise mechanics and want to do programming and all of that. And I just did not feel in alignment with that anymore. So you saying kind of that 2-year period also kind of reminded me of that as well. And not that it takes anybody 2 years to make a decision. It might be 2 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 30 days, whatever. But I think there's value in kind of zooming in and honing in on once we decide. And then of course, believing in our dreams, believing in our capabilities, boosting our confidence and all of that. But then setting up like some strategic groundwork of like, okay, what can this look like? And then sometimes taking the leap anyway. And so, yeah, when I did that though, I started thinking about, okay, when I was 17, I left my parents' house 5 hours away. I went to college, right? And I remember being overwhelmed by doing my own laundry and like having to do like grocery shopping and go to school full time. And so I remembered that. And then I remember moving to Austria, and that was like, gosh, a whirlwind roller coaster of emotions for the first year, right? I remember crying in the store because I couldn't find kale and quinoa, like the real struggles of life, you know? So then I remembered, okay, you did that and that was scary, right? And so then I think that being able to look back, I think sometimes people don't slow down enough to look at their timeline or their history of themselves to be like, okay, I've done hard shit before, I can do it again. I've done something scary before and I didn't die. And so I think that was really helpful too, but it didn't take away the scaredness or some of the limiting beliefs of, oh, can I do it? But to your point, yeah, when you do it, when you do step out, when you do just decide, okay, I'm never going to feel like perfectly congruent and fully confident to just do this now. I'm just going to go after it. That was really, and I look back even now, it's been a little over a year since choosing that challenge, to use your words, of not doing fitness anymore, diving into life coaching and NLP and helping people with the work-ins and healing trauma and, all of that. I'm like, oh yeah, that was really scary. And I did that. And that leads me to believe, and I don't know how you feel, I think like, okay, well, what's more? Like, what else haven't I figured out about my courage yet? And how can I like scare myself even more, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, but not in a way that makes me want to run from it. It's like I almost want to run more towards it. Does that feel the same for you?
Yeah. Well, what I notice is there's that initial discomfort in trying something new, and then we get to a baseline again, and we're like, wait, this seems like not complacency, but you feel a little bit comfortable. Like you're at, as you said, I did this, but like, what's next? So I've reminded myself of, and it is great to remind ourselves of the hard things we've done and being grateful for where we're at, and still being okay and with knowing that we can still evolve in different areas. Not to say that we aren't satisfied with where we're at, because I think that piece is being grateful in that moment is super important. However, on top of that, what else can I do to evolve, and how else can I show up? And so, yeah, I definitely see where once we get to that point, it's also like it's just a loop. You know, you move into the discomfort, but then you manage it enough to where it's normal. It's not easy. It's more normalized. It's more familiar, so it doesn't feel as uncomfortable. And in order for us to evolve, we have to do something uncomfortable, which is just something unfamiliar, in order for us to create true change. And if we're not changing at all times, then and the world's changing and other people are changing, then we're stuck staying the same. And that's where I notice so many people find themselves feeling distanced from, oh, this person's already here, so I'll never start, because they've just been staying the same for years, and other people have been moving forward. And that perception of what they feel like is a really far out dream is what becomes very daunting. And I don't think that that's necessarily true, because those people just took the same type of steps you and I took, which are consistent small steps over time, and they're just that much further along the journey. So being real transparent with yourself on where we're at with the journey. And I love that you're being willing to open into new areas where, like, what can I get into that scares me a little bit? Because I think there's many people that say if it's not scaring you just a little bit, then more than likely your dreams aren't big enough, or something along those lines. And I say that's relatively true. Otherwise, you're just playing it safe. And I think each and every one of us has unlimited amount of potential. It's just the limitations we put on ourselves that are keeping the world from getting that potential. And that's a disservice to us. It's a disservice to the people who really need our help. And that's where I found myself in a struggle with, especially when I was at my old job, knowing my knowledge, expertise, and experience and how I could help people. Except I felt almost guilty by just doing this job that I had no interest in, simply for the money, while there are people out there that could be using my help. So diving deep into that is super important, and your heart usually knows what it wants best. So listening to that intuition is highly important.
Yeah. What limitations do you see are the biggest with the people that you work with that prevents them from living at their peak performance or well-being in the workplace and home life and in all areas of their life? Like, what do you feel like limits people, holds people back the most that you've helped your clients and people you work with discover?
Although I help individuals a lot with health optimization, so we can talk about movement, exercise, nutrition, sleep. The biggest thing that holds any of my clients back is simply their mindset and their belief systems and their patterns. Once those are broken, then you have an unlimited amount of area to go into. You know, I thinking about an example that came to mind was, a client of mine who essentially felt like he could never let off the gas, because if he let off the gas in his job, then things would just fall apart. And of course, that reaffirmed his belief. So he kept doing the same old things over and over again, except it was leaving him feel unfulfilled, all of these things. So simply changing his belief system, which isn't as easy as a snap of the fingers, but talking through that, discussing it, figuring out ways, whether it's through somatic work or breath work or meditation, to start to unlock some of these things, allowed for him to see that it's okay for him to take a step back. And in doing so, it releases some control, which then puts, more energy back in his life, which actually means he shows up more energized in his business. So I would say a lot of those belief systems and mindset are the biggest foundational piece, that when you can dive into those interpersonal limitations, it's not usually a business strategy. It's not an issue with showing up to the gym. It's just something that's inside of them that they've created and reaffirmed so many times that keeps people the most stuck. And a lot of that I'm sure, as you mentioned it earlier, right? It could be trauma. It could be core wounds from early on in their childhood, or just how they grew up and their specific tendencies. And not to say that any of them are wrong, because most individuals are successful in their own right and it got them to that point, but they have interest in moving to another elevated place, whether that's greater relationship or growth in business. So it's going to take them letting go of some of that to then replace it with some new things. And if it doesn't, then that same conditioning will only get them to that same end goal. And I know that in my experience, was the limiting factors was simply just myself. And once I broke free through some of those, then I knew that there was lots of different areas for me to go outside of that.
Yeah. And I love what you said about having gratitude for those beliefs, because they got you to where you are thus far, instead of beating yourself up of how could that, and I think that's important, because we need to look back and be like, wait, I needed that in order to get here. But now if I want to get here, that has to go. That has to leave a little bit. And I know that we're both super into meditation. And I think that's one of the ways where when we get still and silent with ourselves and come back to the present moment, a lot of those beliefs start to show up. And when we get really honest about those, because I think for a while I was kind of like, I don't think that. Like I remember, beliefs of like not being good enough or not being, just like smart enough, or just certain things would come up, or not loving myself and actually like doing self-sabotage as a form of like holding myself back. And I remember when those things started to come up and I just started to write them down, some of my limiting beliefs in my journal, I was like, oh shit, I would have never thought that I was the person that thought those things. But the longer that I suppress those, the longer that it will take me to, get to this next phase that I want to. And then even this week. So today is Wednesday. So on Monday, last Wednesday at breathwork class, I remember, we were doing a lot of breathwork. Then there's meditation. And somehow this limiting belief floated in that was like, you're too old. Like you're too old. I don't know where that came from, but it came because I put myself in that relaxed state, allowed, things to come out of my subconscious and unconscious mind. So instead of saying like, oh no, Lunden, you're not too old. I'm kind of like, okay, where might that have come from? Where am I, where's there some truth to that I can just nurture myself in a little bit more. And so that's why I love meditation so much, because we can be like, go, go, go. I remember just like working 24/7, working out all the time, doing all the things, like my work was my worth. And now being able to be like excited about sitting in nothingness to see what comes up next. I'm like, what other parts of me would be helpful to change and kind of, transmute, digest, alchemize a little bit. Because I was like, that's interesting. So just when we think, I don't know, I mean, maybe people, listening think like, okay, you get to this point and then you're like all good. It's like, not really, but it is all good now for me. I'm not as scared to lean into some of those beliefs, especially when I can get honest with them and be like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe there is part of me that believes that.
Yeah. Well, I would I use the analogy sometimes with clients. It's like, you don't just get fit and all of a sudden you're fit and you're like, all right, see ya, I'll do this. I'll never do this again. It's like, it's a constant progression. So, and it almost is, in a good way though, I believe a double-edged sword is you become so self-aware that now you're even more self-aware of the things that you didn't even realize were there. And now you see that you can transmute them or evolve them and change them, especially through meditation. So as one thing, potentially, let's say, heals, then in a more healed space, you are more consciously aware to see those other things that, that's also been running in the background. So that's an area for me to lean into and understand and get to know better, and not suppress anymore, but just become aware of and bring to light and see in what areas can I improve that, not to fix anything, but just to improve it and to understand it. And I would say that I'm just thinking about my experience with some of those things is typically when I became deeper and deeper into meditation, I realized a lot of that for anything that would come up was almost this internal cry for me to call and say, hey, Pat, you've been doing this for 20 or 30 years. You should probably go back to doing that. And that's where the conscious awareness of being able to not like white knuckle it, but becoming aware of it, say, hey, that served me. Yes, thank you. And I appreciate you giving out this cry, if you will, to keep me safe, but I'm safe. It's okay. I can move forward without this belief and I'm going to be all right. Like giving that some honor and then also moving beyond it. And I like to think about that because it's very often, even in a meditation currently, it's like something could pop up and I'm realizing that all that thought is just a cry for help to bring me back to where this conditioned piece has been to keep me comfortable. However, we just talked about it. If we want to move forward and evolve in whatever area, personally, professionally, relationships, health, it's going to take some getting uncomfortable. So letting that go is a big part of it. And, you think about like the devil on the shoulder and the angel on the shoulder, like the devil tries to creep in only to keep you in the same spot. And that is something that is a skill to become aware of. And if you're not, then more than likely you're just running on that same program. So I love to share that with clients and get them to be consciously aware of that, because I can tell them that, but that's a skill that has to be developed. But once it is developed, it allows for them to see areas of improvement in so many different realms, whether it's personally or professionally. And that's where I noticed for myself, at least, that's where the biggest breakthroughs came from, is just continuing to challenge that inner dialogue and that interpersonal, beliefs that we have set in stone that were more than likely developed between 2 to 7 when we were 2 to 7, which is so fascinating to think about.
Yeah. I love that. And it's kind of, I often have like the DJ visualization where it's like that music, that programming is playing in the background. We didn't even know we were the DJ playing that record until we're like, wait, this is something I can slow down, tune into, start to listen to, and start to nurture and help feel safe changing the song. And that ability to feel safe, I think, is so beautiful. And I found a lot of tools for safety in meditation and breath work and things like that. One of the things that I know is a big part of your story that you share, and I also see myself in that too, is numbing out with substances like weed, alcohol. And I think, I was thinking about this today as I was thinking about us recording and having this podcast conversation, about how do we know, and I don't have an answer, I just thought we could discuss this. How do we know when we're just like raging high school students, college students, just like having the fun going through the phase? And then when it becomes like a coping mechanism or a numbing mechanism or something that we are, using to not feel. And right now, not really by choice, but kind of by choice, it just kind of happened. I'm like so sober right now. It's wonderful. I just did our 30-day Radiance Detox Kit from Naba and Quicksilver. That feels amazing. And I remember the other day sitting on my couch and being like, oh shit, I'm feeling a lot of different feelings. There's a lot happening, but somehow I really like it. Like it's cool to feel sadness and happiness and resentment maybe coming up, and I like heartbreak revisiting from previous situations. Like that's been super cool in a way that I think for a while I just like, would numb out and be like, okay, I'm going to smoke some weed, have a weed gummy, have a few glasses of wine, and just like let that go and put itself away and just start to feel good again, And I know that you've made reels and share like photos of you back in the day, just like raging and having a good time and just not looking healthy, not looking as vibrant as you do now. And so like, how do we know when it's like fun and when it's like numbing? I don't really know, but I kind of think I know for myself, but like, how did you know when it was like, not the right avenue. Hey, really quick, I want to interrupt the podcast for just a minute to tell you about one of my favorite supplements for hair, skin, nails, digestive, and gut health. And that is Snap Supplements Super Greens with collagen. Now, if you're following me on social media, you've probably seen me post about this a bunch because honestly, this product tastes amazing and it's jam-packed with nutrients, like I said, to support healthy hair, skin, and nails. It helps support detoxification, a healthy immune system, and there's even probiotics in there for a healthy gut. It's non-GMO, no sugar added, soy-free, grass-fed collagen, and every scoop is going to give you 7 grams of protein. And this is why I love it, because it's not like a protein shake. It's just a scoop of powder. It tastes amazing. I put it in water, or if I want more hydration, I'll put it in coconut water and mix it up. And it's like having a nice, refreshing beverage that's packed with a bunch of super greens and protein. So what I'm super excited about is that for listening to the podcast, you'll get this discount here, nowhere else, but for listening to the podcast. You can save 25% off on all your Snap supplement purchases, including the super greens with collagen. And you do that by using code Lunden25 at checkout. That's LUNDEN 25. LUNDEN 25 to get 25% off at checkout. You can shop on snapsupplements.com or you can shop on my website, lifelikelondon.com/supplements. And you'll see there's already an additional 10% taken off. But you, because you're a podcast listener, you're going to get 25% off when you use the code Lunden25 at checkout. LUNDEN 25 at checkout to get your Snap supplements, super greens, and collagen, and all your Snap supplements for 25% off. Now, let's get back to the show.
That's a great question. As you said, I would say it's definitely, individualized for everyone. However, looking back on it, I would say for me, I convinced myself that this is just a phase. This is just what people do. But then when I look back now and I realize the extent of it, it wasn't just like, let's go have some beers with my friends or let's like go smoke some weed every once in a while. It was like literally, if you can't remember a time for an extended couple of days where you weren't on something or doing something, basically from the time you woke up to the time you went to bed for, 5 to 10 years, then more than likely it was going to be an issue. And you also knew it was a super big, or I found out it was a super big issue, is when I finally started to detach from that, the type of anxiety and emotions that would come up that I didn't know how to handle to feel, as you were just saying and alluding to, is the depression, the anxiety, the, all of that started to creep in so quickly, but I never knew what that was like because I never had the chance to experience it. So that's where I found, it being such a big thing. And if there's healthy boundaries on it, then I would say that, and you can feel your emotions and you understand yourself, then maybe it is as a healthy boundary. But for me, in that situation, at least, that was definitely not the case. However, the interesting thing, like looking back, was all it was me trying to escape ever trying to feel the pain of some of the things that I had experienced early on. Not that it was something super tragic or trauma based, but it was just like, you have your parents who get divorced, you lose a grandparent or lose a loved one. And when you lose a loved one and you don't really have any outlet to actually grieve and go through those emotions, the whole range of emotions as humans, as we should go through all of them, frustration, anger, sadness, whatever it might be. If you don't do any of that and then you're just automatically suppressing it, and then that never comes back up because you haven't given it time, then that's where there's potentially a problem. And all that is just waiting for that volcano to finally burst, which it did for me later on down the line when I realized that I hadn't really been in a clear headspace for such a long time. And it wasn't only that, now I don't have these to cope with, but now I'm angry at myself for taking this much time in so many of the pivotal years of growth to get beyond that. And so just seeing that for myself was huge. And yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong answer on how to know. But seeing and looking back is very clear to me that it wasn't just a phase. It was like, that was literally my life. Like there was nothing about it that was just like a moderate thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer either. I think it's super personal and subjective.
Mm-hmm.
But same, when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, that was for sure like to get the edge off or to
Mm-hmm.
like numb out of a particular feeling or a state where now I'm like, oh, this is really cool to actually feel. And I recently went to a Christmas party at a close friend of mine's house. And then I went to Mexico with my aunt and uncle and my cousins. And I remember thinking, this is like super recent too. I remember thinking like, okay, what am I going to say when they ask me why I'm not drinking? Or like, how am I going to like say, stand my ground because I really don't want to. I had recently done, I haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, but I recently had done combo therapy.
Okay.
So I was like, I just don't really want to drink. I'm not called to that right now. But the funny thing was, is I got to the Christmas party. I was like, someone asked like, oh, do you want a shot? And I'm like, no. And then I'm good. I'm just like, and nobody said anything. No one gave two shits. No one said anything about me not drinking. Same thing in Mexico. I thought I was going to have to like remind my cousin multiple times, like, no, I don't want a shot of tequila. No, she didn't give a shit, So that also made me laugh too, because I used up so much mental energy even now, right? Like, yeah, I mean, I just say even now because it's like we're always working, always a work in progress. There's always things that we get to grow in and out of. But I really thought about that a lot. Like I would practice saying out loud, like, no, I don't want to drink. No, thank you. I'm good. Like I just did, this combo medicine therapy. And I just like, I'm not really wanting to drink right now. But like nobody asked me more than like once. And it was just like out of a courtesy to like make me a drink,
Sure.
And so I thought that was really funny too, because sometimes we think, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out on all the fun or my friends. And that might be the case, right? I can think of a lot of friends, a lot of relationships that I just had to let go of. And they saw themselves out as I continued to evolve and become more of who I'm becoming. But then there's also a lot of people out there that like, they're just busy living their own lives and they could care less if I have a drink or not have a drink, But I was just laughing at myself and thinking like, oh, I made it seem like people actually cared that much about my habits that they were going to like, rah, and attack me over not doing something. And so that kind of made me laugh a little bit.
Yeah. I find that too for myself is, oh, I'm assuming people are going to react this certain way when we go to, as you said, whether it's a Christmas party or we go out to dinner and everybody's ordering whatever. Like I put that assumption out there. And then I realized that most likely, as you said, they're conflicted, or not conflicted, but they're consumed with their own life. Like they're not thinking twice about, oh, why is she not doing this? And I've come to realize that if that is the case, a lot of times that's just, maybe that's some self-discovery for them to experience on their own end. And I find myself coming up into that often of that. I just say no. And I don't even have to explain myself. But in the past, when I first started, I always felt like I had to have some excuse. Well, not today. I got to do this tomorrow. Or, I had a long night last night, or making something up. And then I realized that doing that is only hurting me because I'm not really living in alignment with what I believe in. And, I also find it, and I'm curious for you, when you're in those situations, do you feel like you have more fun or less fun, or what are some of the ways you have to actively seek out ways to still enjoy yourself? So I know for me, it's like just getting into deeper conversations is like one of the easiest ways for me to make sure that I get the most out of the time when I'm with people.
Yes. There was a time where I felt like I wasn't having as much fun, so I would recluse a little bit more and not join the activities. And now where I'm at today and where I feel like I've been at the last, I would say 6 or 7 months, is I purposely and proactively engage and find myself having a lot of fun, even though I got invited, for example, to a vision board making party last weekend from a girl that I met at a full moon ceremony. And then she came to my house with another group of people to do the Walk for the World, Dr. Joe walking meditation. I had people over to do that. Anyways, she invited me to the vision board making party. I was like, for sure, that sounds fun. They were all drinking like wine and White Claws, whatever. And I was just like, no, thanks, I'm good. And just like also found myself having a lot of fun. So I think, am I choosing to like go out to the bar? And, like, I think I'm also picking and choosing the things I'm doing that potentially also include alcohol or whatever, and just like saying no, and then going into deeper conversations with those people and deciding that that's super fun. But there was definitely a part that was kind of like, this is boring, or if everybody's drinking or partaking, then like, I don't want to be there, so I'm not going to do anything. But then I realized, we're not meant to do life alone. Like, there is beauty in being okay and being alone and not needing to be around others. But I also believe humans are, community beings. And so I just am like, okay, where like, making friends with the people that are at my breath work, where I do breath work and sauna, and, making friends with people at like full moon ceremonies, or just like choosing wisely the people that now I choose to engage with. I think I now find myself in opportunities, like you said, to have those deeper conversations. I often say, like, I don't know how to engage about the Kardashians or like popular culture or a lot of those things. Like, I remember being at a wedding with my best friend as her +1 last year in Cabo, and just like sitting there and being like, I'm kind of in la la land. Like, I don't know. But then I was kind of joking. I'm like, can you guys give me the cliff notes on like what's going on in popular culture, so then I can like kind of know what you guys are talking about, so that I'm not completely out of it. So I kind of made a joke about it too, but I know that about me. I'm like, I don't want to talk surface level conversations. I don't want to talk about the latest series episode. Like, I want to go deep and talk about like what limiting beliefs came up in your most recent meditation. Like, what do you think happens when you die? Do you have funerals for parts of yourself when you start to shed parts of, like, those are the things I want to talk about. So yeah, at first I did feel a little bit like, oh, I'm missing out. This is boring. This is not as fun. But then I just started putting myself in situations and around people that were interested more in those deeper topics. So then I felt like there was growth on both ends, and exchange and evolution on both ends when we were like hanging out.
Yeah. No, I like that approach a lot. I think for a long time for me, just early on, I was using it. I would use it to then isolate, and then also feel almost stressed that I wasn't out there. And then, so, since I've moved to Charlotte, especially, just really being able to, as you said, dive into the areas where it's like I can still connect with people, and it doesn't have to be surrounded by this. And if it is, that's okay too. I just get to figure out how it's fun for me. And then also putting the limitations on, not being at the bar, but if people are coming over for our dinner party and they're drinking, I'm not going to not talk to them. And then just learning how to engage around that. And that becomes, that allows for you to be so much more adaptable. I know for me, at least, was allowing me to get past that of like, I can still go out with my friends. If they're like, hey, we're going to get dinner and drinks, I can still go out. I just don't have to drink. And feeling so obligated, because afterwards I would typically shame myself, which is something that I had to work through too, of like, why am I shaming myself for then actually giving in to drink a little bit and then feeling miserable afterwards? And, again, just getting to find out what that's like and diving into that allows for me to just be a better person. I know at least how I feel and how I show up.
Yeah. And recognizing your role in perpetuating that cycle, and also your role in like creating a new unknown cycle for yourself.
Yeah.
I love that. Tell us about, as we kind of wrap things up here, tell us about your course that you created with Naba, and any ways that people can connect with you and dive even more into your coaching and into your world and realm now.
Yeah. So the course that I have with Naba is called Office Optimization, focused on the individual in the office to reduce burnout and to improve work-life balance. So giving some tools and strategies to really dive deep into what is causing them stress, how to manage that, how to get around that, and how to prioritize the things that actually matter so that they can get back living fulfilled, showing up at their best, being present, not just at work, but with their family, with their loved ones, with their friends, in their relationships, the stuff that actually matters outside of our jobs. And so, yeah, that's my course with Naba. If anybody wants to connect with me, Instagram's the easiest place for me. As Lunden knows, it's Pat Smith Wellness, just like it sounds. And that would be easiest. And other than that, if anybody ever has any questions or I could assist in any way, feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, totally. I'll put the links to your course and to your Instagram in the show notes.
Sweet.
And yeah, if you enjoyed this episode and want to connect with Pat even more, do so. His course is awesome. His Instagram is super inspiring. I consume a lot of your content. I pay attention because I love what you're doing. And I was excited to have you on today. So thank you for taking your time to be here and to share more of you and what you do and your heart. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you bringing me on. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. This really helps a lot. And share this with a friend. I'm only one person, and with your help, we can really spread the message of self-love and sweat and change more lives all around the world. I'm Lunden Souza, reminding you that you deserve a life full of passion, presence, and purpose, fueled by self-love and sweat. This podcast is a Hit Spot Austria production.